Imagine a place that looks completely peaceful. Vast forests, crystal clear lakes, herds of bison, colorful hot springs, and geysers shooting boiling water high into the air. This is Yellowstone, one of the most famous national parks in the United States. But beneath this beautiful landscape lies something very different. A massive volcanic system, one that has produced some of the largest eruptions in North American history. And if that kind of power were ever unleashed again, the consequences might not stop at Yellowstone. Large parts of the United States could be affected, and in an extreme scenario, the effects could even reach far beyond America. That is why Yellowstone is sometimes connected to one terrifying word. But could Yellowstone really bring about something that catastrophic? Or has the threat of this supervolcano been exaggerated? First, we need to understand something important. Yellowstone is not a normal volcano. There is no giant cone-shaped mountain sitting in the middle of the park. Instead, Yellowstone contains an enormous caldera, a massive volcanic depression created by an ancient eruption. The present Yellowstone Caldera formed after a huge eruption roughly 631,000 years ago. And it is enormous. So enormous that visitors can travel through Yellowstone without realizing they are standing inside part of a giant volcanic system. And the heat beneath Yellowstone is still there today. That underground heat helps power thousands of hydrothermal features across the park. Hot springs, mud pots, steam vents, and of course, famous geysers like Old Faithful. So, in a strange way, much of Yellowstone's beauty exists because of the incredible amount of heat still beneath the ground. But Yellowstone became famous for another reason. Its volcanic history. Over roughly the last 2 million years, the Yellowstone region has experienced 3 enormous caldera-forming eruptions. One happened about 2.1 million years ago. Another around 1.3 million years ago. And the most recent occurred roughly 631,000 years ago. These eruptions released extraordinary amounts of volcanic material. And that history is what gives Yellowstone its frightening reputation. But there is a major misconception. Many people imagine a giant underground cavern beneath Yellowstone, completely filled with liquid magma. Almost like a huge ocean of lava slowly filling up, waiting for the day it finally explodes. But reality is much more complicated. Much of the system beneath Yellowstone consists of extremely hot rock and crystals. Only part of it is actually molten. So Yellowstone is not a giant balloon full of magma that is getting closer and closer to bursting. The underground system is far more complex than that. Now we come to the big question. What would happen if Yellowstone experienced another massive super eruption? Before we go any further, this is a hypothetical scenario. It is not a prediction that Yellowstone is about to erupt. If another enormous caldera-forming eruption did happen, the areas closest to Yellowstone would face the most severe consequences. One major danger would be pyroclastic flows. These are fast-moving clouds of extremely hot gas, ash, and volcanic debris, and they are nothing like the slow rivers of glowing lava people often picture when they think about volcanoes. Pyroclastic flows can move incredibly fast, and they can be devastating. Areas surrounding Yellowstone in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho could experience extreme destruction. But the danger would not stop near the national park, because another volcanic threat can travel much farther. Volcanic ash is not the same as the soft ash left behind by a campfire. It is made from tiny fragments of rock, minerals, and volcanic material. It can be hard, abrasive, and extremely disruptive. In a massive eruption, ash could be carried through the atmosphere and spread across huge areas of the United States. The closer you are to Yellowstone, the thicker the deposits could be. But even places hundreds or thousands of miles away could potentially receive ash. And it does not take several feet of ash to cause problems. Roads can become dangerous. Visibility can fall. Vehicle filters and machinery can become clogged. Electrical systems can be disrupted. Water supplies can be affected. Agriculture can suffer. And one industry is especially vulnerable: aviation. Jet engines do not handle volcanic ash well. So imagine the consequences if major ash clouds affected airspace across large parts of the United States. Flights could be canceled. Airports could be disrupted. Cargo could be delayed. Food and supplies could take longer to reach their destinations. Supply chains could begin to struggle. And suddenly, a geological disaster becomes an economic crisis. But the consequences might not end on the ground, because there is another part of this scenario that could make the effects much larger. The atmosphere. A very large explosive eruption can send volcanic material and gases tens of kilometers into the sky. One important gas is sulfur dioxide. High in the atmosphere, sulfur dioxide can eventually contribute to the formation of sulfate aerosols. These particles can reflect some incoming sunlight back into space, and that can temporarily cool parts of the planet. If the effect were large enough, weather patterns in agriculture could be affected. Growing seasons could change. Food production in some regions could decline. Food prices could rise. International trade could come under pressure. And this is where we begin to understand why a Yellowstone supereruption is sometimes described as apocalyptic. Not because every human on Earth would suddenly disappear, but because several systems that modern civilization depends on could be disrupted at the same time. Transportation, energy, agriculture, aviation, the economy, and even the climate. But now we need to correct one of the biggest myths about Yellowstone. Yellowstone is not simply waiting for its time to explode. You may have heard the claim that Yellowstone erupts every 600,000 years. And because the last major caldera-forming eruption happened roughly 631,000 years ago, some people say Yellowstone is now overdue. But there is a problem with that idea. Volcanoes do not follow calendars. There is no alarm clock beneath Yellowstone counting down to the next super eruption. The three major eruptions happened hundreds of thousands of years apart, but that does not create a reliable schedule. And since the last giant eruption, Yellowstone has experienced much smaller volcanic events as well. The most recent known volcanic eruption in Yellowstone occurred roughly 70,000 years ago and produced lava flows. So even if Yellowstone erupts again someday, there is no reason to assume that the next eruption must be a super eruption. In fact, one of Yellowstone's more realistic explosive hazards comes from something much closer to the surface. Hydrothermal explosions. Rain and snow seep into the ground. That water can travel downward and become heated by extremely hot rock. Deep underground high pressure can keep that water liquid even at very high temperatures. But if the pressure suddenly drops, the water can rapidly turn into steam. And steam takes up far more space than liquid water. If that expansion happens quickly enough, it can shatter the surrounding rock. The result is a hydrothermal explosion. Boiling water, steam, mud, and rocks can all be thrown into the air. Events like these are far more likely than a Yellowstone supereruption. So, ironically, while the internet worries about a giant magma monster deep beneath Yellowstone, one of the more realistic explosive hazards is much closer to the surface. Yellowstone also experiences thousands of small earthquakes. That sounds frightening, but most of them are far too small for people to feel. Earthquakes can happen because of tectonic stress, the movement of hydrothermal fluids, and other changes within the crust. Yellowstone also experiences what scientists call earthquake swarms. Many small earthquakes occurring within the same area over a period of time. But hundreds of earthquakes do not automatically mean magma is rushing toward the surface. Scientists look at the entire picture. Where are the earthquakes happening? How deep are they? How strong are they? Is the ground moving? Are volcanic gases changing? Is the hydrothermal system behaving differently? No single signal tells the whole story. And yes, the ground at Yellowstone really does rise and fall. Scientists call this ground deformation. GPS instruments and satellites can measure these movements with incredible precision. Sometimes the ground rises. Sometimes it falls again. These changes can happen because of shifting pressure from underground fluids and other processes beneath the surface. So when you see headlines saying, Yellowstone has risen several inches, that does not automatically mean a massive eruption is coming. What scientists would be looking for is something much more dramatic. Rapid changes, large changes, and several unusual signals appearing at the same time. If Yellowstone were truly moving toward a major eruption, scientists would expect the warning signs to become much more obvious. Earthquake activity could increase dramatically. The ground could deform much faster. Gas emissions could change. And multiple monitoring systems could begin showing unusual patterns. Yellowstone is also heavily monitored. Seismometers listen for earthquakes. GPS stations measure movement of the ground. Satellites watch for deformation. Scientists monitor gases and hydrothermal features. So Yellowstone is not an ignored monster sleeping beneath America. It is being watched constantly. And maybe that is the most fascinating thing about Yellowstone. We do not need conspiracy theories to make this place sound incredible. Its real geological history is already extraordinary. Above the surface, Yellowstone is one of the most beautiful places in America. Forests, lakes, bison, geysers, and brilliantly colored hot springs. But several kilometers beneath that peaceful landscape lies a volcanic system that has been active for millions of years. A system that has produced enormous eruptions in the past. A system that still produces heat, earthquakes, geysers, and movement of the ground today. So, could Yellowstone really bring the apocalypse? In an extreme super eruption scenario, the consequences could become one of the largest natural disasters modern civilization has ever faced. Large areas of America could receive volcanic ash. Transportation and agriculture could be disrupted. The economy could come under enormous pressure. And changes in the atmosphere could temporarily affect the global climate. But that does not mean Yellowstone is about to erupt. There is no countdown. There is no exact schedule. And there is no reason to believe a super eruption is just around the corner. Maybe that is the best way to understand Yellowstone. Not as a ticking time bomb waiting to explode, but as a reminder that beneath one of the most beautiful places in America, our planet still holds an extraordinary amount of power. This is Yellowstone. Beautiful on the surface, powerful underneath.